all of those kinds of things allowed me to just be like, okay, I'm going to be a weird small kid in whatever way I'm going to be, which then also I think freed me to just be myself, which meant being my like neurodivergent self as well.
Hey there, ADHD reWired listeners. Have you subscribed to the ADHD Creatives podcast with ADHD reWired coach Kirsten Martz? The first few episodes are out now. I think you'll love it. Also, do you want to build and maintain new habits and go from managing your ADHD to thriving with your ADHD? Our registration kickoff event for our spring season of coaching and accountability groups is coming up fast. Go now to coachingrewired.com to get your name added to our spring interest list so you can join us for our upcoming spring registration kickoff event next week on Thursday, February 15th at 12 p.m. Pacific, 3 Eastern. More about registration at the break. And now, on with the show with one of our members from our alumni coaching community. Welcome back with another episode of ADHD reWired. Today's guest is Jordan.
Off to a great start.
Off to an awesome start. Is Emerson Jordan Wood. So we'll just be super transparent. So Emerson is here in the office with me, which is a treat. I get that like once a year, and I'm probably even behind on that because of COVID and everything. There was no one here. But you currently live in Minnesota.
Yes.
You lived for a while in Texas.
Mm-hmm.
You are originally from Illinois, in the Chicagoland area.
Correct.
I'm looking at so in my setup process, I tell people, please do not give me the bio later, do it now. Emerson didn't do it.
To be fair, I did a bio. I just don't know that it was the most helpful bio.
So you went to college in Iowa City at University of Iowa. You moved to Texas for a job. Then you moved to Minneapolis to escape Texas. So you're currently in Minnesota. You identify as queer, trans, non-binary, asexual, agender, 27 years old. You're a Libra.
Yep.
You're an alumni of our coaching groups. You were in season 28, so it's spring of 2022. Studied civil engineering. You work in nonprofit construction, diagnosed with ADHD in 2021, self-diagnosed autism in 2022, and that's all you have on the sticky note.
Yeah, I thought it would be mean to write a second sticky note, so I didn't.
Well, welcome to Glenview and to the ADHD reWired headquarters. It is lovely to see you in person.
Heck yeah, thanks for having me.
So after an hour of unsuccessful troubleshooting here on recording, we're recording in an alternative way, so I'm hoping that it's all going to work out. Otherwise, I'll see you on Zoom in a couple of weeks and we'll do it again.
Exactly.
Okay, so tell us a little bit of your story. So, because I've always been very curious about, just different gender identities, sexuality, myself, someone who identifies as bisexual and came out very late in life. And with sort of the ADHD intersection of that and gender identity, so you've transitioned.
Yes.
And so when we think about ADHD and we think about transitions, like transitions are hard. And I am sure that transitioning gender identity hard. How does that mix together?
Yes, it is certainly a lot of overlap that can make navigating that process very tricky, especially if it's not something that you've had to navigate before. And there's a lot of means of transitioning as well, right? So, you've got the medical system, you've got the legal system, the social transitions. Like there's a lot of different means of transitioning, and, different trans people will pursue any combination of those. But I've noticed a lot of, especially the legal and medical systems of transitioning have, depending on the state you're in, have a lot of barriers to access.
You told me, I think it was in Minnesota, something you have to do to legally transition.
It's in Illinois.
Or in Illinois.
Well, at least when I was doing it. So I guess I started medically transitioning. It was weird. I was in college, so I was technically speaking in Iowa and also in Illinois. And that was also where I legally changed my name. which is what you're referring to. I was kind of in like an ambiguous, like, where do I legally change my name? Because I'm not technically residing in Illinois, even though my legal residence is in Illinois, but I have been residing in Iowa because I'm here for college, but I'm not a legal resident there. And my school had a legal services, I guess, facility that they had lawyers that would just help
Hmm.
navigate these different kinds of like legal systems, anywhere from like gender to like rent disputes with your landlord. Like they had a lot of different options. But one of those was a transgender name change fund that kind of helped trans people navigate that system and then also paid for any changes that you made, which was fantastic. And so they kind of helped me figure out like, oh, you can technically change it in Iowa or Illinois. Here's the kind of the process you would have to go through for Iowa, and going to court and submitting documentation, whatever. And then, oh, in Illinois, you would have to submit your name to like a newspaper for it to be published for 2 weeks before you could then actually change it to like. And I was like, what?
Like when you told me that, I was like, they can't be real.
It was. I literally was like, why? Like, what? How does that make any sense? And they were like, well, it's so that felons can't get out of jail and change their name and then try to flee the country. And I was like, so why are we grouping trans people? And I think technically, like, people who change their name for marriage, maybe even too. Like, I was like, this feels like really broad generalizations that aren't really cool.
And then you also told me you have to go to like your bank to get
Yep. I did that this morning. Yeah, I've been trying to change the gender marker on my birth certificate, which is an Illinois birth certificate. And I started this process literally like a year ago. I had to get there's like an affidavit change form that like anybody has to fill out when they change anything on their birth certificate, which like I filled one of those out when I changed my name. And so I'm doing it again. And then I also had to have like a letter from a medical professional stating, yes, this person is trans, which is so silly. Some states require it, some don't. Shout out to the ones that don't. I did it all, got the letter notarized from a bank. I didn't know how to do that. I had to ask my mom. She was like, yeah, you can just go to your bank and they do it. And I was like, what is this bank person going to know? Like, how are they going to know if I filled this form out correctly? Like, they don't. Like, unless they are trans or like, I don't know. It's wild to me. Anyway, I changed it, labeled it, like put X because I'm changing it to gender neutral pronoun, gender marker. And then I get a letter back from Illinois being like, hey, so this isn't right. The gender marker has to say N for non-binary. And I was like, why wouldn't you put that somewhere? Like on your website, maybe, or literally anywhere. I had searched high and low to figure out what I needed to put because it was very vague.
Was there any part of you that felt like this almost feels intentional?
A little bit, honestly. So get this. I was, have to resubmit forms, which I already like finding a doctor to sign that form, like having to go through all of that again. And I was living in Texas at the time. So I was like, I'm not even going to try. It's not something that's urgent. Like I will do this when I get around to it. So I'm back for the holidays and I was like, oh, well, like, let me try, like, give it a go at this, we'll try again. I look online. As of July 2023, it's changed back to X. And you no longer have to get a form signed by a medical professional. You only have to submit the affidavit. And I was like, great. So in theory, I could have just like resubmitted the exact same form that I had done a year ago, except that like it's signed and dated from like before July 2023. So I basically just went back to my bank with the same exact form that I had and just had them re-notarize it for me.
Like, like forget even like what the issue being, that just sounds like an executive functioning fucking nightmare.
Yeah. And that's like honestly like tip of the iceberg, 2 forms. I think for me, the mailing is probably the trickiest because it's like you're doing all of this work and then you have to wait to hear via mail again if you did it incorrectly or correctly. Whereas like when you're going to like change your driver's license, you're going somewhere in person. They'll tell you in person like, hey, this isn't the right form. You need this form. Fill it out this way. And you can be like, great, so sorry. Let me step out of line, correct this, come back. You know, you have to wait maybe an extra 30 minutes or whatever, however long it takes you to like go back through it. And like no harm, no foul. But like the mail trips you up. And at least for documents purposes, like passport is mail, social security card, mail, birth certificates, mail. I think driver's license and like vehicle information stuff, like those are usually the only two things that you're like going in person somewhere to change.
You had just mentioned driver's license, and my birthday's tomorrow, so I'm like, wait, does my license expire tomorrow? So I just checked, and I'm actually good.
Yes.
So,
well, happy early birthday.
Well, thank you. Wow. So, when I think about people who just don't understand, like just different identity related issues, and you think about all the hoops and hurdles that you have to jump through, and if someone can understand the executive functioning challenge to do any and all of this stuff, who would want to go through this unless it was that important?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like,
mm-hmm. Yeah, it definitely, it feels very intentional. Like it is a barrier to access to prevent people from being able to do it. And I think at least you can pretty clearly tell because there are states where you don't have to do any of that. When I moved to Minnesota, I got a license and they were like, what do you want your gender marker to be? And that was it. And they were like, great, here's your new ID. And I was like, oh, fantastic. Whereas like there's plenty of other states where, you know, you might be able to get a gender neutral gender marker on your birth certificate. It's certainly, there's only a handful. And birth certificates, it's even less. I'm very lucky that Illinois happens to be one of like maybe 10 states that you can actually change birth certificate gender markers to gender neutral ones. Most of them you can change it from like male or female. But again, even that, no, and even just changing it from male to female or female to male, like that is still like it's the same process. And there's lots of states that won't allow you to even do that. And there's plenty that I don't know where I was going with that.
I can relate.
The thought left me. But yeah.
Okay. So you transitioned in, when was it?
In college.
Okay.
As a sophomore, was around when I was kind of like exploring gender identity and coming to terms with the fact that I really did not identify with certain parts of my body that gave me a lot of dysphoria. And
what's that like?
Dysphoria?
Yeah, like gender dysphoria. Yeah.
Wild. I think I guess beyond just like not relating to something of that's like a part of you, like feeling like it is not meant to be you. It's very hard to describe, but I know what I struggled with a lot was I had this innate sense that like my chest was not like that. What I felt on the inside did not match the outside. Like that was not supposed to be there. And I would get very sad when I would like see myself in clothes that in my head I was like, I'm going to look so fly in this button down. And then I would look at myself in the mirror and there was just such a like disconnect, like cognitive disconnect that I was just like, oh, that's not me. And that would make me really sad. And I would get sad I would get nervous because I'm like, I don't want people to see someone who's not me.
Mm.
And then I would get sad because I knew I was nervous about something that I really didn't have a lot of control over. And so it's just this kind of like cycle of like, what the heck? And it can be daunting, I think, to like just even think about medically transitioning, especially for me at least. I had never had to like navigate the medical system before. Like insurance and all of that stuff. So, like, knowing where to start or, like, what options are even available to you is, like, hard to know.
Mm. Do you remember how old you were when you started feeling this disconnect between, like, what you saw in the mirror and what you felt on the inside?
So like cognitively, like actually thinking in my head, like, oh, this isn't it. Like, honestly, college.
Mm,
But I think prior to that, it just wasn't something that I had the language to understand. So I didn't even know that it was something I could feel, if that makes sense.
mhm. It
But
does make sense.
I remember like fourth grade, that was when I started developing breasts, and I had a lucid nightmare almost of, like, being naked in front of classmates, which I think a lot of people could probably relate to. But it
But
was
yours had a twist.
yeah, mine was just specifically that, like, people could see my chest, and I was self-conscious about
Mm,
that, and I, like, had similar nightmares about, like, anxiety dreams, like, basically from then until when I had top surgery. And even
mm,
honestly, even after top surgery, it took my brain like a couple months to be like, it's okay to be shirtless. Like, you're okay. Like, everything's fine now. Um, but yeah, so
what was that like for you when you that maybe that first moment, that first time you're like, "This feels like me?"
oh, it was fantastic. I was riding like a high for like 5 months after I had surgery. Like, it was wild. Like, I going into it was definitely, like, not I wasn't not sure, but there was always a part of my brain that was like, "Man, this is major surgery, like, I don't think I'm ever gonna be 100% confident that, like, this is the right choice, and I think if I am, then I shouldn't be having surgery." If
Mm,
I'm so sure about something, like, that felt like that would have been a red flag to me, so but I also was not so unconfident in my decision that I was like, "It's also a bad decision." So but there was definitely, like, doubt of, like, am I going through this major surgery? And then, like, how much, like, happiness am I gonna gain from it? And I think for me, I was like, even some kind of marginal gain of happiness is going to be worth it. But then after I had surgery, I was like, "Oh, no, this is no marginal happiness. This is, like, the best decision
uh,
of my whole life." Like, I don't regret it whatsoever. If anything, I'm like, I regret not doing it sooner or, like, not
mm,
knowing I could do it sooner, which is feels silly to say because realistically, like, I had surgery, like, a year after kind of what we were talking about, like, me thinking about
mm,
gender and stuff like that, like, a year and a half, which is so fast, and, like, I had was very privileged to, like, have good insurance and parents who supported me and a savings account that I could pay for the surgery myself, and so many people don't have any of that.
mm. We do have to take a quick break. Before we do, um, what would you tell any listeners who might be now where you were prior to your transition? Or if they're thinking about it, if they're if they're just trying to wrestling with identity.
Mm. I think what I found very helpful at first was labels and, like, language to describe how I was feeling, because so much about gender identity and sexuality too is very nuanced, and it's unique to you as a person. And I've certainly, like, moved away from labels just a lot more in becoming more comfortable with myself, but I think, you know, it's helpful to have a baseline, but also know that, like, you can make like, your transition is your transition, and it's not doesn't have to be based on anybody else's. Like, you can do as much or as little of whatever you want. It's about what's gonna make you happy and help you feel like you are your authentic self.
Mm. Let's take a quick break, and when we come back, I want to talk about sort of the more the intersectionality of ADHD, autism, and gender identity. So we will be right back. Growth through community. Here at ADHD reWired, that's what we're all about. And nothing embodies this more than our award-winning online coaching and accountability groups. Learn more and get registered for our upcoming spring kickoff event at coachingrewired.com. That's right, spring registration is going live soon, so that website is coachingrewired.com to get your name added to our spring interest list. Once you've added your name, you'll receive an invitation to start your pre-registration process so you can join us for our spring kickoff event on Thursday, February 15th at 12 p.m. Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, and we just made the pre-registration process easier. You know, they say it would have been shorter if I had more time. Well, that pre-registration video, that's part of the pre-registration process, we just cut that in half. So we're saving you time and making it easier. If you're wondering what group coaching can do for you, if it really is possible to thrive with your ADHD, and you're wondering if community can make a difference in our lives, then your chance to find out has come.
Before this group, I doubted my ability to grow.
I came to the group feeling stuck.
I was diagnosed as a child and I knew how to handle it as a kid, but I never matured and figured out how to handle ADHD as an adult and what it means to be an adult with ADHD.
What I've accomplished in 10 weeks, I didn't do it alone. I did it with all of you. I did it with my A team. It's one of the hardest things I've ever done. The results so far, for me, have been really positive in the sense that I do believe that I can live without fear.
You realize that trying to find better tools isn't really just the only solution. It's finding a community, finding people, and finding support, and learning how to ask for help and learning how to give help better. I think that really helps make a difference.
The thing that I learned was I have a place in this world.
They just taught me to be compassionate with myself and to say, hey, this is a process.
Everyone in the group who's talked about their issue, we all then become invested in wanting to see them grow, and by proxy, wanting to see ourselves grow.
I can continue to learn and relearn the techniques that have been shared with me here and continue to receive the support that I've gotten here, which I also didn't know I needed, but I'm so grateful for.
I came in expecting to get a tool belt and then I'd take those tools and get with me, but I feel like more of a different person who has tools that I can use. So thank you, all of you, for such a wonderful experience.
My parting wish is that you would each see the incredible beauty within you.
I really appreciate everyone. So thanks, everyone.
Yes, ADHD is real. It can make it seem like we're going through life on hard mode, and it's even worse when we feel like we have to do it alone. But when you join our award-winning coaching and accountability groups, not only will you walk away with shiny new tools and actionable strategies that work with your unique ADHD brain, you also won't have to face any of these challenges alone. If this sounds like the community you want to be a part of, we'd love to have you. Get on our spring interest list now by going to coachingrewired.com and click on the big button at the top of the page to add your name to our interest list. Then keep an eye out in your email for your invitation to get started with your pre-registration to join us. That's coachingrewired.com to get started so you can join us for our spring registration kickoff event next week on Thursday, February 15th at 12 p.m. Pacific, 3 Eastern. One more time, that's coachingrewired.com. We can't wait to meet you. All right, we are back. How do you think that your ADHD has been impacted by your identity and transitioning, or do you think it has? How does that kind of unfolded for you? Because you were not diagnosed until last year, or 2 years ago?
2021. So
Okay.
yeah, I had moved down to Texas and been there for about a year before I was like, this anxiety diagnosis isn't quite it. Maybe there's something else. It was middle of the pandemic. So as much as people don't like it, I definitely used TikTok to figure out some things and was like, hey, this shoe's fitting a little bit better. Let me go talk to an actual professional and see what can be done about this. So yeah, 2021. So at that point as well, I will say I had transitioned as much as I was planning to. I had had top surgery, I had changed my name, I'd been on T for a year at that point, and obviously that's not, like, kind of an ongoing thing, but I felt very comfortable with my gender identity as a whole. So getting that ADHD diagnosis and going through that kind of, like, relearning myself almost, and, like, even going through the coaching group a year later, like, there were a lot of parallels that I could draw between, like, coming out as a trans person or a queer person and, like, coming out with, like, ADHD or autism, like, that kind of, like, new awareness and understanding that you're gaining about yourself. There were a lot of, parallels that I could see, so it was kind of funny to, like, for, like, queer me to kind of almost, like, parent the ADHD me and be like,
Hmm.
"It feels young right now, but, like, you were this young as, like, a queer kid in college, and, like, look where you are now. So, like, just imagine in 3 or 4 years." But I think in terms of how they've affected each other, I think honestly that I think about this a lot, like, if I had been diagnosed with ADHD prior to transitioning, what would that have looked like? Um, and I don't think I I don't think I would have been, just because I m was masking my gender in such a way that also masked any neurodivergency
Mm.
as well. I was masking as a neurotypical female. And so in many ways, like, unmasking my gender identity meant, like, r questioning and looking at, like, okay, how do I act in the world? How does the world act towards me? Like, how are all these things related? And, like, coming to terms with, like, all right, like, I don't want to be perceived in X way or this way, and how do I navigate that and, like, accept that I'm probably always gonna be misgendered? Like, all of those kinds of things allowed me to just be like, "Okay, I'm gonna be a weird small kid in whatever way I'm going to be," which then also I think freed me to just be myself, which meant being my, like, neurodivergent self as well.
Hmm.
So I don't know that, that would have been possible if I was in, like, high school or middle school, like, that it's such a weird thing to even think
Hmm.
about because I know how much I was masking real hard, like, so hard.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was, I think probably hiding a lot.
Hmm. What kind of kid were you growing up?
What kind of kid?
Yeah.
Like, in what sense?
I know, like, if someone were to ask that question about me, I'd probably say, like, an overweight, nerdy kid. I don't know. I was
Mm,
like
um, I was I mean, I feel like I definitely fit into a lot of the, like, gifted kid to burnout pipeline of just, like, as a
Interesting.
kid, loved reading, don't read anymore.
Hmm.
Like,
Oh, that's so
was
sad.
I know, I get sad about it too, but here's the thing, everybody's like, "Oh, just, like, read before you go to bed," and I'm like, "That is the same as watching a TV show for me." Like, my brain is as invested in that book as I am in a TV show, so there's nothing relaxing about that. I'm just gonna, like, put down my book when I finish it 3 hours later at 4 AM and, like, no, so it just doesn't work, but
Yeah.
anyway, yeah, I definitely was the, like, striving to achieve, and, I was in band, played sports, like, did typical things, but certainly I was doing what I thought I should be doing.
Hmm. And during all that, did you always have this feeling of feeling like an outsider?
Yes and no. I think more so, like, in high school, at least, I was much more aware of it from, like, a sexuality perspective of just knowing that, like, hey, my friends are talking about, like, these boys that they like, and I know I don't like boys, but, even unpacking that of, like, well, I must like girls, and then being like, "Oh, no, like, asexuality is a thing. I could like nobody. Fantastic. Great." Um, so I think there was always, like, in elementary school was probably the, like, recognizing that, like, boys and girls play can't play together. Like, you know, I wanted to play flag football with the boys, and like after 3rd grade, they were like, we could really like we play with each other, and like they would never pass to me because I was a girl, and I was like,
Hmm.
what the heck? I'm just as good, if not better, than some of you. So like, get over it. And so it's just kind of like accepting that, like, oh well, like I'm a girl, so I must hang out with these people, even though I'm not necessarily interested in what they're interested in. So definitely fell in with like, I don't know, band kids were certainly like an awkward group of our own. So it, you know, we all kind of fit awkwardly together. But there was definitely always that kind of like, I could tell the, I guess, I kind of think of them as like patterns, like that are to gender, like that, and how people perceive them. Cause, you know, everybody has a different perception of gender, and then how they respond to that perception and act because of that. And it's interesting to see kind of, I don't know, everybody's like different interactions and all that stuff. And I could tell that from a young age that like, oh, what I want to happen is not what other people are doing. And to fit in, I need to do something else.
And when we were talking, I think it was last week, you said you had this really interesting experience. I was asking you about like, just thinking about a queer person working in construction. I was like trying to like, visualize that, and like all of the like just my assumptions would be like that would probably be awful. Then you shared like, well, it's different because you're working nonprofit construction, but then you did say that you had this weird experience of experiencing some kind of male privilege.
Yes. Yeah. So nonprofit construction is definitely, at least from my experience, more accepting and forgiving in some ways. But I mean, by no means is it perfect. I don't think any industry you go into is going to be perfect. But um, yeah, I when I moved to Texas, started initially with a nonprofit. I was doing like an AmeriCorps term, and similar to like kind of like Habitat for Humanity-esque, like we're rebuilding houses. And so we were doing the general labor side of rebuilding houses, but we also had like a lot of volunteers, and sometimes we were working with subcontractors. So it was a very varied experience. And I was also traveling for disaster related construction. So I think kind of the experience I was thinking of in particular when I was talking with you was in like small town Louisiana. So it was like less the like company I was working for per se, and more the area that I was in. But I, at that point on that trip, was maybe 6 months into taking tea. So I was very much so still like a 14-year-old boy. Like voice was cracking, like, you know, whole shebang.
Just be like you're the Dookie Howser of construction. You're just yeah.
So, but people perceived me as that, as a guy, or were starting to like their initial gut reaction was sir. Um, and with that meant that like, oh, I'm the only one being acknowledged on site because they think I'm the only man on the site. That trip in particular just happened to be with um, a team of women and myself as a non-binary person and one other cis identifying male. Um, so by all means, we were like a very like queer and feminine team, and people would kind of scan our group and like lock in on me and then be like, that must be the person in charge. I should go talk to them. Even though we all have, in terms of like experience, we were all equally as experienced in our like AmeriCorps terms. And there was nothing that they knew about us as a team other than what they saw in gender to say like, I should go talk to this person first over the like 5 other women that are here. And that was the first time for me, at least, that like I had experienced that happening, because previously I was just lumped in with the women and people just wouldn't, I was given the same acknowledgement as everybody else. And I was like, I remember people starting to do that, and I would just like kind of stare, like shocked almost, like internally being like, why are they doing this? What is going on?
Did that make you like feel good or angry or both, or like
Both. it was affirming in the sense that they weren't perceiving me as female. It was also not affirming though, because I knew that they were perceiving me as a man, which while it's not totally incorrect, it's also not correct.
Mm.
But it also means that, it kind of comes at the cost of my female coworkers, where like I know very innately what it's like to experience like discrimination because someone thinks I'm a woman and not, think I'm smart enough or whatever. And to see that happen to other people, like in real time, be like, oh, someone's acknowledging me and respecting me because they are like, not necessarily because they respect me, but because they're like disrespecting my coworkers in a way.
Mm.
So that was, I don't know, it's definitely conflicting. And I think for me, at least a little bit, especially younger me, I can't say that I figured it out at this point though either, but like understanding the like patterns of like what it means to be a man in society, I was never taught that.
Mm.
Like growing up, I learned how to be a woman and like the patterns and social cues that go along with that. Whether like I don't, it was always a very like conscious like effort, I think, for me to like do that or like imitate that. Like it was always like an imitation, a mask, like mimicking. I never figured out how to do that for the male gender per se. Even now, I'm like, I could figure that out. I don't want to though, because I'm not a man. Like, and like, I also, I know the patriarchy does not serve anybody. And so I know like if I am to go and learn how to be more masculine or whatever, like inherently I'm also going to be learning like toxic things that are not serving myself or the people that I'm interacting with. And man, taking the time to like figure out what is good and what is not helpful, like that's exhausting. Like I'm just going to be myself and like let other people figure that out for themselves.
Yeah, there's so much wrapped in there. There is,
Yeah,
wow.
it is so loaded.
It's like a Rubik's Cube of identity.
Yeah, yeah. And it's wild too, because no matter how much work I do to be confident in myself or like unpack gender, like because it is a social construct, it inherently like involves the interaction of other people. And I can only do work for myself. I can't like help other people work on their own stuff. And so there's always like, I can always tell like usually people's initial reaction of like sir or ma'am or whatever. I've at least noticed like if people misgender me one way or the other, that's how they're always going to misgender me.
Mm.
So my goal was always to be like, oh, well, like let me have like make them assume that I'm a guy.
How do you deal with that? Like when you get misgendered?
Oh, complicated. It definitely depends on the person and the relationship I have with them. If it's someone that it's a relationship that I care about and I value, I will correct them if they don't correct themselves first. If it's a stranger, I don't care. I could not care more. I'm never going to see you again. Yeah. So usually with strangers, I let them assume what they're going to assume. And I mean, it sounds weird, but like I will almost like play into that.
I was actually wondering because
Yeah.
like thinking about this from like the ADHD lens, where like there's a little bit of like that like I'm gonna just poke at you a little bit because it's kind of stimulating to the brain. Like, is that a little bit what's going on?
Less that and more like, and I will say this was less true. Is less true now that I am in a town like Minneapolis where like I feel safe.
Mm-hmm.
But especially when I was down in Texas and like traveling to Louisiana and Florida, I was very cognizant of like, how are people perceiving me? And I would tell my team, I was like, hey, like, I know you guys use they, them pronouns for me. I just want, and like, that's fine. You can keep using they, them pronouns for me. Just know that if we're interacting with people and they use he, him pronouns for me, I am not going to correct them because it is, one, it's safer for me to just let them assume what they're going to assume. And we're going to run into less hiccups. Like, our job is not dependent on how people perceive me and my gender. So it feels weird to just like, hey, do you want to have a conversation about gender neutral pronouns while I just like try to rebuild your house? Like, it's not the time or the place necessarily. Yeah. And so I would just say, hey, like, I'm not going to correct people if they misgender me. Like, it's not worth my energy. Like, the amount of energy it takes for me to, have the courage to say, hey, actually I use they, them pronouns, and like, approaching that conversation can be so exhausting that like, if I do that, if you are someone that I'm having that conversation with, then that I care a lot about our relationship to go to the effort of having that conversation.
When you had said that sometimes you just kind of let it go because it's kind of easier and you feel safer. Like, I just felt so sad. Like, I was like feeling myself getting kind of choked up. Like,
yeah, it doesn't, like, with one-off encounters, it's, it is what it is. It's definitely harder when like I am like knowingly kind of performing in this way for like an extended period of time, just because like people don't care to learn or change, or like, it's just not a conversation that I want to broach. Make it like, that's a decision that I have to knowingly make, saying like, I don't want to spend the energy to do this. Also, then I have to be okay with the fact that like, I'm going to be misgendered on a regular basis, and how do I feel about that? And it was certainly, when I was younger, a lot more like triggering to be misgendered. And I think just being more comfortable with myself, and knowing that like, my gender identity is not determined by what other people think of me, has made that a lot easier to deal with. Certainly not like, I'll like brush it off my shoulder kind of thing. Like, it's still like, it hurts, but it's not like as stabbing of a pain as it was before. And I mean, that's not to say that it's easy. That took time. That took years and years of like unpacking that and like coming to terms with that. It's certainly easier said than done.
Do you think that the work that you've done coming to terms and accepting your own identity has also made it easier for you to sort of accept the ADHD identity, the autism identity, like, those neurodivergence pieces?
100%. Definitely. I think that knowing, like, doing the work to accept that like, I am who I am just because I am, makes doing that work for like gender and sexuality, makes then accepting the same thing about my neurotype. Like, they're almost like, I know like a big part of our coaching group was like working on acceptance and all of that. And I know coming into coaching group, I was like, I don't need that. Because it almost felt like so innate to be like, why wouldn't I accept myself? And of course I definitely still had stuff to learn. Like, there's always more acceptance that you can do.
Isn't that annoying? Because it's so true.
Yeah.
It's,
like, gosh, I thought I did this work
like,
already.
There's always more acceptance. There's always like these blind spots that we're like, oh, I'm so self-aware, but I just discovered this about myself.
Yep.
Right.
You're like, wait a second.
Let's take a quick break. We had about 8 or 10 minutes left. And when we come back, let's talk more about ADHD and autism. So we will be right back. All right, now it's time for the ad for a product or service that doesn't really exist. Oh, wait. No, it's not. I ran out of time and had to get my audio uploaded. We'll get you one next week. Now, back to the episode. All right, we are back. Before we talk about ADHD and autism, I was kind of curious about, Are you still taking tea?
Yes.
Can you see if, or say if that like has impacted in any way your ADHD?
Well, I guess it's hard. I think hard to tell because I was only diagnosed after I had already been on T for a while. But like I can definitely, well, I won't say that I noticed right away. It was initially one of my coworkers that noticed and was like, "Hey, man," and I was like, "Oh," but they pointed out like, "Hey, you're a lot more irritable than you usually are. Did you like up your T dose recently?" Because this was a coworker who like had also like dated trans mask people in the past and like had some experience with this, and like I was very open with her about it, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I totally am." And like so just that alone, like navigating like irritability and like anger and frustration, like I never really had to kind of process those kinds of emotions before. And then, starting T and then having kind of coming to the realization with ADHD of like, oh, emotional dysregulation is like really hard. And like that kind of overlap of like my fuse that like used to be like miles long suddenly just got like exponentially shorter. And I was like, oh my gosh, like how was I like just like doing some light plumbing work 1 second and then like 5 seconds later I'm about to like rip the sink out of the whole counter. Like, oh my gosh. And so like having to go through the like, okay, breathe, like give myself some options, like, okay, you can try this one more time. Or you can just like walk outside, go drink some water, have a snack, kind of just step away from the situation and like you can come back and like it is not so urgent that you can't just like step away from it a little bit. Or you can try one more time. And if you don't get it that one time, then you're definitely walking away because otherwise you're about to break something important. Like having to do that kind of processing work, I was like, that was very new to me. And one of my therapists was like, yeah, like ADHD thrives on like anger and frustration, like that kind of those kinds of emotions like give your brain dopamine. And I was like, oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. That explains so much.
Do you think it helped at all with like any like tenaciousness or activation or not really?
I don't think so. Not that I no. I think Adderall did that most of that.
Yeah. So what was that? What was that like starting Adderall?
Very helpful. There were, I think, for me, a lot of the like the executive function skill that I struggle with a lot is like that task initiation, which, I could have the best time management ever, but if I don't initiate the tasks that I plan for on my time management, then that plan goes kaput. So, starting medication helped with that task initiation so much. Like it was just like light and day
Yeah.
with like how like I almost like it just like added like a little motor into me that could just be like, oh yeah, we're gonna go do something now. Oh my gosh, we're doing things. Look at us.
I know when I started taking Adderall, 20 some years ago, it was like for my whole life, like I knew the thing I needed to do, but like I stepped on the gas, but I was still in neutral. Like it was like the engine would rev, but I didn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
And it was like as soon as those meds kicked in, it's like, oh, first gear, here we go.
Yeah.
Right. It was like this magic of, oh, I have a thought. And now I'm taking action on that thing. It was wild.
Yeah, completely foreign. Well, I won't say completely foreign. Previously, I just used anxiety to do that, which, living in a constant state of like flight is not the best. So not having to do that to like get myself to do things, like just being able to not anxiety free because always some level of that, but like healthy amount of anxiety, and like I don't have to just like panic my way through life anymore. I'm like, this is fantastic.
It's like not getting stuff done fueled by, oh shit.
Yep. Oh my God, we only have an hour until that test. Maybe I should start studying right now.
So what was it? You said like TikTok helped you identify the ADHD piece, then you saw a doctor. What was going on though that made you kind of seek this out?
Yes. So my last semester of college, I was very stressed out. I was studying for my engineering fundamentals exam. And because I did an extra semester of college, it was kind of an off semester. Like, it was like most people were taking it in the spring semester, but I was taking it in the fall semester. So, like, I was in the middle of taking the seminar that they kind of helped you, like, study and prepare for that while I was taking the test. So, a lot of people had that seminar in advance to the semester that they had to take the test. I was kind of winging it, flying by the seat of my pants, being like, "I got this." I did not have this. I failed it the first time I took it. Well, I don't wanna say failed. I just did not, pass.
First attempt in learning.
Yeah. Well, and it was interesting because it's not like a set score. It's like a score based on how everybody that also took the test at the same time as you did. Yeah.
But don't compare yourself to others now.
No, exactly. So it's like, technically speaking, I could have passed, but if everybody else did really, really well, by those standards, I failed. So there's no real way of knowing. I'm like, anyway.
Ugh.
I did not pass the first time, which was, for me, I think, so much because of my anxiety. Like, it's a 6-hour-long test that, I also, I didn't have the right calculator because I totally read the list of calculators and was like, yeah, I have that calculator. I did not actually have that calculator. And so I walked in and I was like, look at this great calculator I got. And they're like, you can't use that. And I was like, oh no.
Wait, so you had to take this test without?
I had to use the little calculator they had on the computer. Yeah, so that added a lot of time to me figuring out how to solve problems.
Oh my gosh.
So there was just a lot that didn't go well. And it's a new environment, taking a test on a computer. There was just a lot of unknowns and at the time, I mean, still true to this day, but a big source of anxiety for me has always been doing things that are new to me or that I don't know what's going to happen. I'm not prepared for just a lot of that. What are the social expectations?
And is that, I was going to ask you, is that what led to exploring autism?
Yes, because there were a lot of things that I struggled with that ADHD did not answer per se.
Like what?
A lot of the social cues and expectations that I have always struggled with, and especially around dating and relationships, that just kind of always just went over my head and still do to this day.
You and me both.
Yeah. And so there's a lot of those kind of comparisons that, I think one example that I would always see was folks with ADHD struggle in conversations because of the shorter attention span, inattention, just not invested in a conversation, whatever it may be. And whereas autistic people might struggle because they don't understand the social dynamics of a conversation. And I always related to that side more than I did the ADHD side. And I mean, there's certainly when you mix the two, it gets a little funky, but there were definitely things that I was like, okay, ADHD does not completely solve this. And so autism was explained that a little bit more. But anyway, I'm going to loop back. Long story short, I started anxiety medication my last semester of college. And it was great. I was not anxious anymore, which meant that, in hindsight, I can say that, my primary coping mechanism for my ADHD was gone. And I was in the last semester of college. And I got really depressed because I could not do anything. I could not motivate myself to do anything. It did not help that the support system that I had with friends, they had graduated already. So I was creating a new system. There was just a lot of turnover, I guess, that made that really hard. But in the back of my brain, I was like, this anxiety medication should not make me depressed. Because I know people that are taking this same medication for their depression. And so the math was not mathin', but
what were you taking?
Escitalopram or Lexapro. Okay. And a very 10 milligrams. I think it was the lowest dose that they started me on. And I was like, oh yeah, well, this is working. But it was not. And I ended up staying on that for a year just because it was easier to stay on it. And after a year, I was it got better. Like, my depression got better when I moved to Texas because I wasn't in school anymore and I was doing a job that I enjoyed and, like, kept me interested, and, but after a certain point, I was like, "I, like, don't like not feeling."
Yeah. I remember when I was in college, shortly after I think it was after a full semester on Adderall, after I was diagnosed, I did really well, which then raised the bar. And it's
Mm,
like, and that's like right where my perfectionism was born. Because I was
yeah.
like, all right, I'll just spend like 18 hours a day in the library because that's how I'll continue to do well. Thank goodness for Adderall. And
Mm,
then I started taking it was, Boost Bar, and which is an anxiety medication. And I just remember like feeling high, just like I was like floaty and like just didn't care about kind of anything. I was like,
yeah.
I got to study. Not feeling it. It's okay.
Yeah, very, like, indifferent.
Yes. And
Yeah.
like, and as someone who struggles with activation,
Mhm.
that was not working for me.
Yeah, no, I remember sitting in our engineering building, like, staring at a computer being like, "Homework. I should do this. I can do this. I will do this." I did not do that. I had, like, 5 hours, like, it was, like, 2 a.m., and I was like, "I'm not being productive." Like, it was like, it's more productive for me to go home and sleep than it is to stay here, and yet, if I don't do this here, I'm not gonna do it anywhere else. And, yeah, so a lot fell through the cracks that semester for sure, but, yeah, through the pandemic and kind of being away from that environment, I was able to kind of be like, "Okay, like, there's no reason," like, outside of that really stressful environment, like, I can see how, like, I could be depressed from that, but, like, this has continued for a year into a new job that, like, I actually enjoy a lot, and, like, it doesn't add up. Like, what's the harm gonna be in not taking this and seeing how I feel now that I'm outside of that stressful environment?
Mm.
And in the back of my mind, I was like, "I think I have ADHD, and this anxiety medication is probably not helping. The only way to know for sure is to stop taking it and to, like, go see a psychiatrist and talk about it outside of that." So
So did you stop it like abruptly or did you?
no, no, no,
Okay.
no. I talked to my doctor who was prescribed my PCP was prescribing it for me, and I was like, "Hey, I think I have ADHD and I kinda wanna get off this medication." She wasn't able to, like, diagnose me with ADHD or anything like that. She was like, "If you get a diagnosis, you can and, like, you're on meds consistently, and you can bring that to me and I can keep prescribing your meds for you, but I can't
Yeah.
initially do that." And I was like, "Okay." And so she was like, "Here's how you can kind of, like, slowly work yourself off," and oh my gosh, it's a gnarly detox off of that. Like,
Yeah.
it took me, like, a month to
Well, at least you did
oof.
the detox process. When I was in my undergrad, I was for about I think about 2 years I was taking Effexor,
Mm.
and I just decided that I didn't wanna be on it anymore,
Oh,
and I just stopped taking it.
oh no,
And
oh
I
no.
told this to a psychiatrist once, and I'm like, "I have no idea what coming off of heroin would be like, but I'm guessing it probably is similar to that." And he's like, "That's not even close. Coming off Effexor cold turkey is way worse."
Oh my god.
And I was like, well, at least it felt validating because it
Yeah.
was like, I mean, it was
Oh,
like I remember like literally just like in the fetal position,
yeah.
like sweating and feeling like my bones were like coming out of my skin and these brain zaps. And like,
Yeah,
I
the
mean, it
brain
was,
zaps.
oh
I
God.
My doctor was like like, talked with her and she was like, "Yeah, people say, like, you might experience brain zaps." Like, I have never experienced this, so I don't know how to describe it any better, but people say that that's a pretty accurate representation. Yep, brain zaps. That is how I would describe it.
So if, for people who are listening, if you're on some kind of antidepressant or something like that, and you're like, I don't want to be this anymore, please talk to your doctor and
Yes.
go slow.
Yes, yes, yes. I don't know if it worked out that when I was doing that, it was winter 2021, so, like, Winter Storm Uri had just happened in Texas, like, the winter freeze that shut everything down, and so our office had been closed for a while just because, like, people literally didn't have power and whatnot, and so I was working from home for, like, a week, and I was like, "Thank God," because if I had not, like, I don't think I could have gone to work even though I was, slow. It was such a slow detox, but I was like, I could tell when the, at that point, like 2.5 was like still wearing off because I was just like so dizzy. Like I was like, oh my gosh, I'm glad I'm working from home because I can just like chill for an hour while I wait for stuff to rebalance. Like it was gnarly.
And I've heard talks before, with doctors talking about how one of the problems with lots of pharmaceuticals is that you can't like micro adjust enough, and it's like it's so important to be able to do that because it's like because sometimes like the two different doses that are available, one's too low, one's too high. Like something in the middle might be ideal, but it's not available in that preparation. That's one of the reasons my son's doctor really likes the Daytrana patch. Because you can, if you wanted to, you can cut it and be pretty precise about the dosing. So yeah, man, meds.
Yeah, it's wild.
So we are about out of time here. Is there anything else that you want to share with listeners? Anything you want to mention about, I don't know, your experience at the coaching groups or I don't know, like
chirp. I don't know. I mean, the coaching group was certainly, I think it was very helpful for me gaining kind of like how I mentioned with sexuality and gender, like having labels and like that language to describe how I was feeling, like going through the coaching group and getting like words to describe like time management and like task initiation, like these different things that have always struggled with, and being able to like point a finger to that, to just gain that more awareness and understanding of like how my brain works. And then, even what to potentially do about those things. What a novel idea. Was so helpful. And if anything, just again, helps, I think, navigate conversations with people that you want to have those conversations with, to be like, hey, family, like, this is how I work. And it's honestly, it's how you work too. So like, maybe we should talk about this a little bit more, and like, so we can all better communicate with each other and not keep stressing each other out.
I mean, because at the end of the day, isn't it what we all want, is just to be understood?
Yeah. Oh, 100%. 100%.
Well, I think that's all the time we have for today. This has been lovely. Thank you for coming to Glenview to do this, and sitting here while I tried to troubleshoot some tech stuff for, I don't know, a while. So
I'm more than happy. I was glad to come out.
Thanks so much. And that, my friends, is all we have for today. Thank you, Emerson, for joining me on this week's show, and thank you, my ADHD friends, for sticking around until the end. Want to hear more from our members of our coaching alumni community? Why not give episodes 400 and 401 a listen? And if you're interested in group coaching and becoming an alumni, you can learn more about our coaching groups at coachingrewired.com. Otherwise, you can find everything ADHD Rewired, including our Patreon community, our free and secret Facebook community, our adult study hall community for virtual co-working at ADHDrewired.com. And thanks again, Emerson, for jumping in to join me on this week's episode. And we'll catch you all back here next week.